Hello and welcome to What We Learned This Week, where we talk about what we learned this week. I'm Ryan Harp, and we're going to talk.
I'm Salma.
I'm Kat Wargo.
Who wants to go first?
I can go first. So I'm taking this art class for my arts proficiency called 3D Design and Form. And I guess it's been interesting just like making art in like the 3D sense, because the art that I normally make is either like poetry or like basically writing or, drawing. So I've never made art in like that took up like space in like real life, if that makes sense. And so like the types of like considerations that you have to make and like the types of like, things you have to account for, like sort of like the space it takes, or like how thick and thin something is, or like how, I don't know, like it's kind of hard to describe, but I feel like I've been making a lot of like different like connections in that class than I would have otherwise, like if I was just like taking a creative writing class, because that's what I've always done.
That's interesting, and it connects to what I learned this week.
Really?
In a oblique way, but this week I learned just how much trash I generate just by living. For a project that I did for my film class, we're making a film about a guy who eats trash and collects it from the dumpsters. And we had this scene in the kitchen where he's making like a soup, and we needed the kitchen to be trashed because he lives in squalor or whatever. So the whole week, but leading up to the shoot on the weekend, I was saving every bit of trash I had, wrappers, cans, everything. And I was getting the room ready that morning of the shoot, and my kitchen, it was like someone had dropped a bomb in there. It was crazy, just like how much material I accrued over such a short period of time. And I don't know, I just thought that was an interesting lesson that I wouldn't have expected to get from that project, but it made me think.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm Catalyze Wargo. I'm the Director of Academic Innovation and Pedagogical Partnerships here at STLI. I'm new, so I've been doing a lot of onboarding and just trying to see what kinds of different offerings there are across campus. So the last couple of weeks, and I don't know how this connects, but it's something that I learned, so we'll get to be challenged by how this connects. The last week or so, I've gone to a couple of neurodiversity sessions that have been offered for faculty, and the speakers did a really great job of differentiating between neurodiversity and neurodivergence. And so that was something that I thought, okay, this is really great to be able to differentiate in this way. So neurodiversity, as they explained it, just applies to all of us. Like, we all have different ways that our brains work. It's like diversity in the world. It just means that there's variance, and so that variance is like inherent in that we all have brains and they all function and operate kind of differently. And then neurodivergence, as they explained it, is really that some individuals operate kind of outside of what is considered the norm. But the norm, there's really no like normal, right? It just means the median of like cognition and kind of how our brains function. And so that was really interesting for me to think about. And they brought up all kinds of examples of people who may diverge from the norm in different ways, but specifically I thought it was interesting that they brought up kind of sensory like issues that people might have, and I was reflecting on my own experiences throughout my entire life. I won't age myself, but it's been a minute. And throughout my life, I've experienced all of these different kinds of sensory, like I would just call them annoyances or picadillos or what have you, that like really bother me more than other people. And so as I was attending these neurodivergent sessions, I was thinking, oh my goodness,
Yeah.
Like, maybe this is a new way to think about the way that I'm responding, or like my kids are responding to things, or like my students in my classes are responding to things, like, lights or sounds, or the way that things smell and so forth. So it just made me think, as someone who supports educators, that these are things that we want to be considering in our instructional approaches.
Yeah.
Cool. So now I guess we got to tie it all together.
Yeah.
So what you said about like considering things in space was really interesting to me, because like when we were coming up with our concept for this film and planning our scenes, we knew implicitly that we would have to like trash the place and what that would take. But when I was actually trying to figure out how we would execute that, I had to consider all sorts of things, like how much space is it going to take up, or like he collects trash bags and I needed to make them look full, but he carries several and I don't have that much trash, and also it was preferable for the actors to not carry around actual trash. So I figured out that if I just filled them up with clothes, they looked full. So I guess that was sort of similar to what you have to consider in the 3D design form and class.
Yeah. And I guess, like, yeah, because, like, filmmaking is an art form in and of itself, so, like, each of them, like, deals with, like, space and time and, like, imagination, like, very differently, which is, like, really cool to see, like, the overlap and also, like, the differences between each art style.
Well, and also with sculpture, that sort of ties into what you were talking about, because, like, with neurodiversity, like, different people, they're going to experience the sculptures in different ways, and they might look at them from different angles. And that's one thing you have to consider with sculpture, is like, since it's a 3D object and not like a 2D plane, like there are multiple perspectives you can look at it from, and so you have to be wary of all those different viewpoints.
Yeah, that did happen to me, actually, because when I was, like, showing my friends, like, what I was working on, one of them was like, oh, that looks like a puppy, like, and then another one was like, oh, it looks more like a human heart, and I was like, I don't see any of that, but that's interesting. Yeah. My
question, I guess, relates to kind of that brain-body connection, because I also, write poetry or write narrative, and I feel like there is a big difference between the physical creation of things versus like the cognitive kind of writing creation of things. So how do you feel different between the two processes?
I feel like low-key sculpture and, like, I guess, like, 3D art is kind of, like, grounding me a little bit more in a sense, because I have a tendency to, like, be up in my head all the time and just, like, thinking about things and not really being in touch with, like, the world around me and the people around me. And it's, like, sort of a bad habit I have too sometimes. Like, I'll just be walking around and my head is up in the clouds, and I'll see someone I know and I'll, like accidentally ignore them. So, like, I don't know, it's just, like, stuff like that happens to me a lot. So, like, I feel like, being, having something tangible to work with, it's making me focus, like, more in my, like, senses and sort of on, like, what's in front of me and around me, as opposed to just being up in here all the time. And I guess that's, like, a nice, like, break from, like, thinking,
Yeah, words are messy.
Yeah.
I kind of, I'm an English major, but I kind of hate words. And like
that's interesting.
Words always take me out of the text. Like if I'm especially if I'm reading like a science fiction thing and I see some word that I know has this like historical connotation, and I'm like, but that wouldn't have existed in this world, so why does that word even exist? And I'm always thinking about that things, and I always just want to get away from them. So like this film, it has no dialogue. And that was part of the assignment, but I actually prefer working that way, just because you can get to just visual, like tell the story completely visually and with sound. And I feel like that connects more to how language is a big part of how humans experience things, but like the senses and like visuals are also hugely important.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for coming. This has been What We Learned This Week. I'll see you next week.